A month or two ago, I did 2 videos for After the End talking about interesting facts, and I thought it'd be cool if I did that today here in Godherja. So let's just jump in here. Number 1, the language of Empire. The reason there are multiple Adversarian languages in Godherja's world is that during the initial development of the mod, one of the OG developers decided to try and make a comprehensive conlag of that early language, and as a result created a variety of their own words and names for things in Adversarian, like autocrata. This was forgotten about and partially abandoned for a while, but added back in the mod as the language the Magi speak to try to be elitist, like an old Latin of sorts, if you want to equate the two. And this is also the reason some things are named as they are. It was basically an attempt to try to make the Adversarian language sound legitimate. Number 2, Shai Hulud. In the deserts of Ceridon, there is the skeleton of a giant sandworm known as the World Eater, which is worshipped by a sect of ritualists known as the Slaves of the Great Worm, who believe there are numerous World Eater spawns sleeping below the surface of Eris, and who make sacrifices to them so they never awaken. This is pretty obviously a reference to Dune and the sandworms, but with this sandworm in particular being big enough during its lifetime to swallow entire cities, which is what it was doing a lot of, before it was slain by the powerful ritualist queen Radiah Udayir, this of course being after it had eaten the previous Ceridon ruler in the 2nd century IS, causing a bit of a succession crisis. Number 3, blood and wine. Blood wine is a popular drink of the Adversarian elite, and is often believed to be literal blood of slaves, but it's actually just a glass of clear vodka mixed with a single drop of blood from whoever is hosting the feast or event. Drinking blood wine from a host is considered a sign of respect and fraternity, and the higher ranking or powerful a person is, the more prestigious it is considered. Famously, an autocrator actually bled to death by insisting on serving blood wine to a feast of over 200 guests, and was lauded afterwards at his funeral for it. 4, an empty sky. Did you know that in Godherja the stars in the sky aren't real, or likely aren't anyway? This is because when Arsanon first created Eris, or existence itself really, they decided to fill the night sky with stars purely to fill it with something. This could very well mean that when a person on Eris were to look into the sky, they are simply looking at thousands of motes of suspended light, or pinholes in an endless black spherical firmament. It is unclear if there are actually other heavenly bodies besides Eris, though we know the Aelfir did attempt to reach the stars to find out, and there are constellations which were perhaps just exercises in amusement for Arsanon, although we'll never know. There's also a large hole in the stars where humanity shot the spell that killed Arsanon, with different cultures having different interpretations to its meaning. So yeah, kind of bleak to imagine that if you look up in the sky, it's just nothing. Speaking of that, number 5, Heaven and Hell. Silas Stavro, the Wandering Arch-Lich, most famous for being apprentice and slayer of the first Arch-Lich, Vilas Venslav, and for his invasion of Chevali and defeat by the champion in the Red River War, had a vision of the afterlife when being turned into a Lich. Briefly, as he stood in that limbo between death and undeath, he stood before the gates of heaven as a sort of spirit, and found them horrifying. Dead and blackened were the words he used specifically, basically emaciated and nothing was there. Very likely this is because of Arsanon's death, meaning if there was once a heaven, it no longer exists for anyone on Eris, or worse, it is some kind of spiritual hellscape of torment and horror. Fun. 6, a Godherja RPG. In line with that last fact, Silas was defeated temporarily anyway since he's still alive, by someone we know only as the Champion, who was likely a member of one of the anti-magic orders who not only united the realm during the War of the Five Crowns and Red River War, also bested Silas in single combat on top of a roof in Petit Gizred. Despite this impressive resume, we know next to nothing about the Champion, who they were, where they came from, what they look like, nothing. This is because they were designed to essentially be a sort of RPG protagonist in the world of Godherja that, if the stars were to align, the player would assume the role of them in a Dragon Age or Baldur's Gate style game, which is cool, so I hope one of you funds that in the future, and I hope you give me a voice acting role, because I would really like to do something in that. 7, the City of Gold. To the south of Ceridon in the jungles of Demoda, you can find a single county ruled by people known as the Atabyssians, who come from a technologically advanced society to the south that some say has access to everything from walking automatons of solid gold, known as golems, to flying ships, guns, and even trains. They practice a faith known as Gudi, or vessel prayer, in which they pray to a giant golden statue in their capital city. Statues would have existed long before the arrival of the Atabyssians, meaning they were probably Aelfir make, but who knows. They believe that within these statues lives the spirits of gods who created the world, and furthermore instruct the Atabyssians in their doings. This is done by way of priests who are permitted to come face to face with the statues and commune with them, going into a trance-like state and awaiting the gods' words, which are relayed to the ruler of the city. So far, all the statues have spoken of is of conquest and supplication of the world, and given the Atabyssian invasion of Demoda not long after the game's start, it appears they need to move north sooner than later, so watch out for that because they're quite strong. 8, the Lone Wanderer. Long ago, before the death of Arsanon, there were 2 races of their creation on Eris, humans and the cruel Aelfir, who were magically and technologically brilliant, but infinitely evil. Humanity, after thousands of years of enslavement and the absence of Arsanon as they worked on their third being, overthrew the Aelfir and killed Arsanon. Many of you know this. However, did you know that there is actually one Aelfir still alive, cursed to live forever, who wanders Eris? Known simply as the Wandering Aelfir, this being of immense sorrow walks the earth in search of death, never finding it, cursed to witness the world it once conquered fall to ruin, praying it all ends so that it may go with it. Kinda sad. Number 9, Sir Knight. Even though they are a mostly patriarchal society, since the life paths don't make a distinction between men and women, and since trying to influence someone's chosen path is considered heretical by the Hrad Krcma, women can be found in nearly every position in Chevalian society, from politicians to courtiers and even knights. And since there is no guideline for female knights, the term knight and sir are used interchangeably in the rare instance when a woman decides to pursue the path. Number 10, it's me! I titled this one this way because, well, I'm in the mod. If you go to Ceridon near Harthau's capital, you will find this baron with a Chevalian culture who practices wardenism. This is actually me. This isn't official lore either, because none of the barons who are characters outside of the game are, but my own headcanon for this character is essentially he's a traveling adventurer storyteller who came to Ceridon to witness the potential fall of the Aegionists from the front lines, and because he felt the call of wardenism, or perhaps he just pretended to and converted as a convenient means to get closer to the action so he could write about it later. I consider him sort of a Varrock kind of character, so that's certainly possible. Once Landless gets added to the mod, you could also probably play as me, I'm sure, and I have pretty good stats, so that's pretty lucky for you. And I'm going to add one more here at the end. This is my favorite nickname because I did a nickname video recently. This one's not going to get a number, but I am going to make this. Up in the Fjallvoki lands, there is a dwarf who has the greatest nickname I think I've ever heard, which is the Giant Layer, which is basically means that this guy laid with a giant and claimed her, which is a crazy thing to even picture, but I think that's really fun. And that's going to be it for this one. I hope you guys like this short little video about some interesting facts. If you have any interesting facts you want to drop down below, let me know, please. I'd love to read them. I didn't want this one to be too long because Godherja has a lot of lore that I've already talked about, and I didn't want this to be redundant, so I tried to piece around and find things that I haven't really mentioned, or maybe I wanted to re-mention that you might have forgotten. Or if you're new, here's some interesting stuff about the world, but there's a lot more, and I've got a lot of videos about that, and there's a lot of documents you can read, so yeah, go check those out. But as always, I'm Soul. This has been 10 Interesting Facts about Godherja for CK3, and I'll happily see you in the next one.